Our latest project was laying out this natural sandstone pathway and the staircase. I'm going to take you through the whole procedure and then the cladding of the natural sandstone. Pathway's laid out in crazy paving, and then I've filled it with a mixture of gravel, bluestone and cement to offset the natural light-coloured stone.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
Our latest project was laying out this natural sandstone pathway. It had two basic elements to it: the sandstone pathway and the staircase. It was a pathway leading from the road to the deck. I'm going to take you through the whole procedure, including the excavation, the concrete base we laid under here, the concrete staircase, and then the cladding of the natural sandstone. The pathway is laid out in crazy paving pattern with a combination of gravel and cement fill in between the cracks. The practical part of this project was creating access to the driveway over there and stairs that brought you up to the deck height. People had started using this side entrance of the house as a main thoroughfare, so the owner decided to make it official by putting this sandstone pathway and staircase in. And so my client wanted a safe, attractive platform pathway for people to be able to walk and enter the deck area. Part of the design aspect of this and make it seamless with the ground level. So it has a slight ramp from where the building starts to where the road edge is. And then it's basically dead flat all the way through with a slight raking towards the grass, so it naturally drains into the grass area. Originally there was a timber step here that people used as a way of stepping up to the deck. So we removed that and replaced it with a concrete structure clad in natural sandstone, so we could have easy access to the deck from ground height. It ended up being calculated out as 4 steps to give you a nice step height. The sandstone part was for aesthetics because we wanted it to tie into this crazy paved pathway we'd started. But the practical aspect was to create easy steps up to this deck platform. But instead of doing the crazy paving pattern that we have on the pathway, using like a tile system, custom cutting all the sandstone pieces into tile squares and use tile adhesive to stick it over our concrete foundation to create a really solid staircase. The main element of this project was putting the stone pathway in. The pathway is constructed over a concrete slab with the sandstone glued down with tile cement, levelled as we go with packers to make sure it has a slight gradation running out onto the grass. And then I've filled it with a mixture of gravel, bluestone and cement to offset the natural light-coloured stone.
I go red when you're sitting nearby. I'm like a young child. Oh, it's silly how time just flies when we play and you hide. You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
So the stone pathway comes all the way through here. Came and sprayed the grass about a month ago to kill it, to make it easier for excavation. We're going to be removing these pavers and reusing them over here because that's part of our project too, is we're redoing some paving to get it to a new height over here. We've got to excavate all this dirt out of here, about 150 mil, set some edging up, pour our concrete on, and then we'll be ready to stick our stone down.
The first thing I have to do is remove these old pavers. We're going to be using these pavers around the side on another one of the jobs on this property, which is going to be to relay an entryway paving section at a different height so it matches the stairs properly.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
My next task is to remove this bench seat. People have been using it as an improvised staircase to access the deck. This is what brought about this project. Although this had been constructed as a bench seat, people were using it as a giant step to access the deck. So that's why the owners decided to put a staircase here. The new staircase is going to be concrete, clad in sandstone. But the owner would like to retain the bench seat, so I'm going to re-erect it around the side of the stone staircase. I won't be reusing any of the structural timber, but I will be reusing the decking planks. This way it'll match the existing deck. I want to remove this deck planking as carefully as possible because we'll be reusing it. So the trick here is to be able to back out the screws without blowing the heads off. Most of these screws are coming out quite easily. I stack all my deck timbers off to the side. I like to keep a really clean construction site when I'm doing demolition. I don't want to be tripping over any of the timbers, creating any accidents for myself. Most of the deck planking came off without any trouble. A couple of the screw heads have failed in these other planks, so we've got to do a bit of fiddling to get them off. Now that I've harvested all the decking successfully, we're going to demolish the frame of this structure. I won't be saving any of this material for rebuild. I'm using my wrecking bar, crowbar and hammer to lever these timbers apart. I always hammer flat any nails or screws as I'm doing my demolition, as I don't want to accidentally step on them or cut myself later when I'm removing all the material. I'm using my small circular saw to make a couple of strategic cuts in the framing. After cutting through the framework, I finish it off with my mini sledgehammer. I take my time and try and work slowly and carefully. It can be easy to injure yourself in demolition. I also don't want to damage any of the structure that's going to be remaining. By staying focused on removing one piece at a time, having the right tools to do the job, we can get this done without hurting ourselves or damaging our property. After removing most of the frame, I've started pulling out the stumps. This involves a lot of digging and hammering.
Oh, it's silly how time just flies when we play and you hide. You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt.
That completes the primary demolition for this job, removing that wooden step because we're going to replace that with concrete and stone. Before we start our excavation, I needed to do a little more cleaning up from the demolition the day before. I'm breaking up all the concrete from the wooden stumps I pulled out because I'll be able to recycle these concrete chunks in the concrete staircase we'll be constructing later. I'm now going to excavate the dirt along the entire pathway length. This excavation is going to be about 150 mil deep. We have to make room for the gravel bed, the concrete slab, and then the stone on top. The finished stone pathway is going to end up slightly above the grass level for drainage. I don't want to remove too much soil from our excavation. If I dig too deep, I'll ruin the compaction of the soil. So when we pour our concrete on top, there won't be any sinkage. So I'm using one of the scrap timbers we got from the demolition as an indicator to keep track of how deep I'm digging. By laying my spirit level across the scrap timber to the grass, I can get an accurate idea of how deep we've excavated. Once I've got a relatively large section scraped out at the right height, it's easy to keep track of the depth just by eye. I'm trying to be extra careful with my mattock, not to dig too deep. Just make short, sharp strokes. I sprayed the outline of our pathway over a month ago with weed killer, so this creates a really clear line on where to dig. After removing most of the soil with the mattock and shovel, I give it a final touch up with my rake to get it all smoothed off. I've probably got about 80% of the dirt removed at this stage. After we add the timber borders that'll set the height for the concrete, we'll rake out a little more to get it exact. Our sandstone pathway is going to be laid over concrete for strength and durability. But I started the preparation for this by removing 150 mil of dirt all the way along our pathway. This morning our gravel base was delivered. I was able to get this dumped right next to where we're going to be using it. I usually try to get my gravel and sand products dumped on top of a tarpaulin. That way we don't get any contamination between our material and the grass and soil. My process for creating this sandstone pathway is to attach the flagstone to concrete with tile cement. Gluing the natural stone to a stable concrete base creates a really durable and strong pathway. For this system to work effectively, I need the concrete to be dead flat and set at the appropriate height so our pathway ends up at the right height. To create a concrete slab in this way, we need a timber frame or timber formwork to help us manage the concrete, creating the right borders and height for the slab. I have to construct a sturdy and accurate timber frame for our concrete slab, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're starting our timber frame on the side that's next to the house. This formwork is going to stay buried behind the concrete and won't be removed, unlike the outside formwork, which we'll be pulling off once our concrete's set up. Once I have all the pieces installed along the side of the house, we get to the section where our staircase foundation's going to be. I'm fixing this part of our frame to the stumps that hold the deck up. I lock the plank in with one screw when it's at the right height. This allows me to adjust it after I've checked with my spirit level to get it on the right height at the other end. Then I lock it in with another screw. When these timbers are locked in at the right height, they work as an indicator to let me know how much more sand I need to remove. I use the excess sand as backfill behind these boards to help stop the concrete pushing them out. I then use my rake to even out the whole pathway now that we know what height we need the sand to be at. The width of these boards represents the thickness of all the material we're going to be adding before we stick our stone on. The top of these boards is where the top of our concrete is going to be finished. So we finished setting our edge along the building side here, stop the concrete from pouring under the void in the bottom of the house. The outside edge of our path has a curve in it as it enters the roadway. The best way to create a curve in our concrete slab is to use strips of plywood so we can bend it and end up with the curve we need. I mark up some 7mm ply with my spirit level to the same thickness of the 2x4s we'll be using in the straight sections of our formwork. With all our plywood strips cut to the right thickness, I need to prepare the 2x4 so we can have a seamless join on the concrete when we pour it later. I'm cutting out a space in the 2x4 the same thickness as the plywood. After trimming the 2x4 that's going to make up the straight part of our pathway to the right length, I set it in place to prepare the assembly of the plywood piece that's going to be attached to it. I'm using my spirit level to align these two places in a completely flat plane. This is going to ensure that the concrete comes out flat at this junction point. I'm fixing the plywood strip to the 2x4 with 3 screws for extra strength. And here you can see how the plywood sits flush with the 2x4. After roughly placing it in the correct position, I need to attach another piece on the end next to the deck. I always drill pilot holes before putting in screws, especially at the end of a piece of timber. Without a pilot hole, you'll split the timber and it'll create a really weak join. With all the parts assembled for our outside edge, I put it in place, lining it up with the deck stump that we're going to attach it to. I'm double checking with my square to make sure everything's going to come out plumb. Then I fix it off with a heavy screw. Double check the joins to make sure they're plumb, as this is going to ensure that our concrete slab comes out completely flat. By checking measurements with my tape measure at regular intervals, I can ensure this outside edge is going to come out parallel to the building. It's critical to double check our measurements and make sure the timbers are square and plumb, as this is going to create the foundation for what we'll be laying the stone on and creating the entire pathway step. I'm double checking the level at the far end of our formwork before we move on to adding the cross pieces that's going to create the slight slope for the runoff of the rain. It's also going to lock in the outer edge of our formwork to the building so we have a nice parallel pathway. I'm using my large set square to double check this piece before I lock it into the building side of our formwork. I'm using scrap pieces of plywood as packers to help me align this cross piece to the outer edge of our formwork. I'm taking my time with this process as it's critical for these bits of timber to be completely flat, otherwise our concrete won't come out correctly. Once our cross piece has been assembled securely, I double check with my tape measure that we've got a parallel connection, and then adjust the packers using my spirit level to create a very gradual slope. This is what's going to create the slight runoff of the pathway to help it drain onto the grass area. I repeat this whole process with the cross piece we're putting in the center of the pathway. Once this is locked in place, it'll create a really solid rectangle. Then we can move on to working on the end of the pathway where the curve is. I create the curved edge of our pathway with this flexible plywood piece we'd attach to the 2x4. I'm using some short stakes to rough out the curve, locking in the far end and working my way back to the flat part of our pathway. Once I'm satisfied the curve's on the right shape, I add more stakes along the plywood edge until I create a really firm structure for the concrete to form up against. I double check with my level before I fix the formwork off to the stakes with screws. As the curve takes shape, I keep adding more stakes in between the existing stakes to soften the shape of this curve. Here you can see how we've achieved a very gradual curve, starting from the straight part of the pathway up to the side of our road. The end of the pathway where it transitions into the driveway is engineered a little differently from the rest of the pathway. It has a slight slope on it to match the height difference between the driveway and the general part of the pathway, and also the concrete's going to be a lot thicker to make sure that it's strong enough if it gets driven on by a car or a truck that it doesn't crack our pathway. So this end of the pathway is going to be almost double the thickness. So here I've attached a piece of our 7mm plywood to a 2x4 to create the extra thickness for the concrete we'll be pouring later. I also have to set this at the slight angle to create the very subtle ramp that we'll end up with on the end of the path. Once I've installed this piece at the correct angle, I can add the very end piece that completes the formwork for the concrete. This last piece at the end also has a slight curve, so I've used our 7mm plywood to create this form. We're just repeating the same process of locking it in with stakes and screwing them off. Having this timber formwork set at the right height and shape is what's going to ensure that our stone pathway ends up at the right height and shape to fit this space. The finished timber form also enables me to add the right amount of base gravel that's going to be underneath the concrete and add extra stability and drainage for the finished product. Being able to have the gravel right next to where I need to put it is really convenient. It's not always the case on my job sites. I often have to cart these kind of materials in with my wheelbarrow, but in this case I'm able to shovel it directly from where it was dumped into my formwork. My plan is to add about 75mm of this gravel. Our formwork has created about 150mm deep void, so the bottom half will be gravel and the top half will be 75mm of concrete. We're building on sand here, so I'm adding an extra thick gravel base under my concrete for stability.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane. And as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise.
This end of the pathway is being engineered differently from the rest of it. The foundation here is being built for road traffic as if it was a driveway. Because of its proximity right next to the road, it's inevitable that cars are going to drive on the edge of this. So to stop it cracking in the future, we're pouring a 150mm slab here and doubling the amount of reinforcement steel mesh, which is my standard engineering system for building pathways that are going to be driven on.
Hand in hand, building castles out of sand, reaching for the grand. As willows align, we lose track of time. Head up high, now we climb.
You can see how the pathway's been broken up into different sections with the cross timbers running across the path. This is to create what we call expansion joints. This is the last section we have to fill with gravel. The practical reason for this project was to create access from the driveway to the deck. My client also wanted access directly from the deck into the garden.
Another element of this job was creating this bench seat. I used the original planking material. It was on the original bench seat that we replaced with this stone staircase. So the customer liked the bench seat for sitting here enjoying this beautiful garden. It also doubles up as a stairway access to the garden area from the deck. It's just large steps. We reused the planking or decking material, tied it under the deck here so I could cantilever it over the grass so it had a floating effect.
In preparation for the construction of this seat step in the future, I needed to harvest the decking material from the old bench seat. While cleaning up the scrap timber from our demolition in an earlier episode, I was careful to sort out all the reusable planking. I was able to remove most of the decking without damaging it, so there'll be enough planks for us to create this bench seat later. I'll store these planks safely out of the way over here on the edge of the garden where I have all my construction materials gathered. The next thing I need to do is create my own access point onto the deck. All my tools are stored under this veranda and I'll be needing to access them throughout the construction process. Because we've removed that bench seat, there isn't any easy way to get up to the deck, and it's going to be some time before we have the concrete staircase in place. I'm using some of my pre-formed timbers that I use for retaining walls to create a temporary staircase here. I'm fixing it together with the minimum amount of screws, but I need it to be strong enough so it doesn't fail as I'm walking up and down it. This is a common situation with my job sites. Because I'm constructing pathways and staircases, I often need to create my own temporary pathway or staircase for safe and easy access of materials and tools. In the last episode, we got all the formwork and gravel prepared for the concrete we're going to pour today.
So the plan today is to get a slab poured, because over this week we're trying to get as many slabs poured as possible so we can start building this staircase up. When you've got a really long pathway like this, you have to break it up into expansion joint sections. It helps me manage how much concrete I can mix and pour and get into a form in a certain time. And also from an engineering point of view, you need to break up a pathway like this with expansion joints, because if we try to pour the whole thing in one piece of concrete, because a slab this long is likely to crack. So by pouring it in different sections, we control where the crack is. So the plan here is to sort of checkerboard our concrete pours. We're going to be building a staircase here. So right on this edge is one of our separation joints, which will be invisible because that's where the stone will run into the bottom of the stairs. And the rest of the slabs I've paced out evenly.
I'm measuring out the reinforcement mesh we're going to be using in this foundation here on the grass next to our pathway. The mesh comes in large sheets, 4 meters by 2.5 meters. Our pathway is 1200mm wide, so here I'm cutting them into 1200mm strips so they'll fit inside the pathway. I'm using a steel cutting disc on my large grinder, wearing iron ear protection. It makes sense to cut the mesh for the entire project, although I'll only be using one of the pieces today for the staircase foundation. Using heavy 14mm reinforcement bar in combination with our mesh adds a lot of strength to our pathway. Here I'm cutting those pieces up with my small grinder. To set our reinforcement mesh up in our formwork, I'm using these little plastic supports which are designed to hold rebar. Our slab is only going to be 75mm thick. These are designed for 100mm thick slabs, so I have to dig a little bit of the gravel out of the way to get them in place. We need the reinforcement mesh to be about halfway inside the slab. These plastic supports help the rebar stay in place as we pour the concrete into our forms and ensure the reinforcement steel ends up setting in the right place. Once I've created a sturdy platform with the 14mm rebar sitting on the plastic supports, I add the mesh on top. I take my time to adjust the mesh into the right position. We need to have a gap between the steel and the timber forms around the entire perimeter of the slab. We secure this mesh to the heavy rebar with wire ties. I get the process started with my fingers and then finish it off with a set of pliers to get it really tight and strong. I always start mixing my concrete by adding the sand and gravel first. It comes pre-mixed in the right ratio, ready to go. After I've added half the gravel I need to my mixer, I add the water. Then I add the Portland cement. My standard ratio is about 6:1 Portland cement to sand and gravel, which means 6 shovels of sand and gravel to 1 full shovel of Portland cement. I add the shovel load of Portland cement a little bit at a time to help it mix properly with the gravel and water. Once all the ingredients are thoroughly mixed together, I dump them into my barrow. I've laid down a piece of plywood to create a small ramp so the barrow full of concrete can access the form without disturbing it too much. The first batch of concrete is added quite gently and slowly so the reinforcement mesh doesn't get pushed out of alignment. I use my trowel and rake to agitate all the concrete into the bottom of the rebar mesh. We just continue this process of filling up this form until we get the concrete to the top of our timbers.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Daydreamer, kidnap me. Have me running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot. Have me running around dressed in a gown, barefoot.
Once we've filled the concrete up to the top of our formwork, I roughly smooth it out. This doesn't have to be perfect because this slab is actually the foundation for the staircase. I add short pieces of the 14mm reinforcement bar that we cut up earlier with a small grinder. This is what's going to tie this foundation into the staircase to come. This foundation is just the first part of a series of concrete pours that's going to create our staircase that eventually gets clad in sandstone. The next slab I'm pouring is going to be part of the pathway foundation. Before we prepare the formwork for this pour, I have to tidy up the house foundation that's running into our slab. I just want to chip it away to make sure it's underneath the top of our slab so when we pour it we have a nice neat junction. I prepare the reinforcement steel the same way I did in the other slab.
No mistake ever kept me late. We spent summers catching fireflies and winters on our skates. One big smile across my face. We used to dance our way to church on Sundays. Mama set the pace. Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days.
The concrete mix is going to be the same throughout all the slabs we pour in this pathway. The only difference on this setup is I was able to set the mixer up so I can pour directly into the slab so I don't have to bother about the wheelbarrow. I've set up a couple of bits of plywood here so when we dump the mixer it'll help direct the concrete into our slab foundation.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Daydreamer, kidnap me. Have me running around in a gown and a crown.
I'm continuing to mix the concrete and dump dump it in our form and then rake it through. The raking really helps take the air out of the concrete and settle it around the reinforcement bar. At this point, I'm just trying to fill the concrete up to the top of our formwork. When I've added enough concrete to fill our foundation, I start the screeding process by agitating a 2x4 on top of our cross pieces. This sets a flat plane for the slab. I finish the process by troweling off the concrete to make a nice, smooth, flat surface for our stone to stick to. With this foundation complete, it's time to take a break and enjoy some of the wildlife in this large garden. My client has lived here many years and she went to a lot of trouble to plant the right type of trees to attract koalas into her garden. One of the advantages about working in the countryside are all the beautiful plants, birds and animals I get to enjoy. And in this job site, I'm lucky enough to have feeding koalas above me as I work.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
I always like to take a break and enjoy the beauty of nature. It helps me get present, quieten my mind, and then I get back to work. Whilst the slab we just poured hardens up, we're going to move back to the foundation of the staircase.
We've poured this slab out with reinforcement bar set in it. That's because we're going to be building a staircase on top of this. So this is to help connect everything into this foundation slab that we've poured.
When you pour concrete in separate pours, you have to join it together with steel reinforcement bar. Concrete won't really stick to itself, so we use the steel to stitch together. This concrete slab is hardened up enough for us to remove some of the formwork. After removing the screws that held the formwork together, I tap the formwork with my small lump hammer to help break it free. We can now see that the pours come out really solid and we're ready to move on to the next stage of this staircase. While I'm letting the concrete harden up on the last slab we poured, I'm starting some of the preparation for the concrete steps we're going to be constructing. By measuring from the ground height to the top of the deck, I'm calculating about 4 steps will create a reasonable stairway. Most local councils have rules about minimum and maximum step height. Our steps are going to be 160 millimeters high, which is slightly above the minimum step height and well below the maximum. The tread length is going to be 385 millimeters, which is slightly larger than my foot and will create a safe and comfortable staircase. After finalising the design for these stairs, I can install the timber planking on the side of the house we're going to need to hold the concrete structure in place as we build it. I'm cutting all the treated timber planking to length and stacking it in place for material selection to make sure I don't have any unsightly imperfections in the timber. When the planking's too wide for my timber to cut it all the way through, I flip it upside down to finish the cut. By lining up all the timbers in place, I can make one last check to make sure I'm using the right side for looks. I need to mark out where our planking is going to start. I'm using my spirit level to create a perfectly plumb vertical line for us to build off. I want all the screws and the planks to line up exactly, so I've set up a template system here where I'm going to pre-drill all my planking, and by using a template it makes it quick, efficient, and we'll end up with a really nice end result. I always drill pilot holes to help stop the timber splitting. I make sure my first plank is lined up plumb using my spirit level, then work my way along to the corner. I only put one screw in on this first pass, and later when I double check that everything's lined up, we'll come back and add a second screw along the whole row. I'm finishing off the last section with planks laid horizontally. These will be hidden by the staircase landing. I need them to be strong enough to be able to hold all the concrete we'll be pouring for this structure. Our concrete slab is hardened up enough now for us to remove the cross pieces. I needed the cross pieces to set the height of the first 2 slabs, but this next slab is going to be poured between the 2 existing slabs. so we don't need these cross pieces any longer. This 2x4 I'm setting up against the side of the house will keep this slab matching the two existing slabs. We're adding our steel mesh the same way we've done for all the other foundations. Today I have a little helper called Gus. I'm using my standard concrete mix of a 6:1 ratio. I use this particular type of wheelbarrow because it's low enough for the cement mixer to be able to dump the concrete into it easily. The 4 wheels make it really stable so I don't have any spills. I'm using a different process on adding the concrete to this slab than we did with the others. Once I've got the volume of concrete close to the top of our forms, I use my shovel to top up the concrete so I can keep control and not end up with any spills. Here you can see how I'm using that straight edge we installed on the side of the house to smooth out this concrete with my 2x4 screeder. I'm agitating my 2x4 back and forth to get a really smooth finish on the concrete. Then I add more concrete by shoveling it from the barrow and continue the process. I finish off this slab by smoothing out the edges where it overlaps into the pre-existing slab. While we let this concrete harden up, we'll continue our work on the final foundation at the end of the pathway. I'm doing a little cleanup on this foundation. I was using this as a place to dump my excess concrete because it was out of the way. Now the concrete's hardened, I'm breaking it up and removing it in my wheelbarrow. Later I'll be able to recycle these pieces in our concrete step. I'm excavating some excess gravel I added as part of the platform for the concrete mixer when I was pouring the earlier slab. The property owner's little dachshund called Gus wants to help me out with this gravel. I need to excavate it to a depth of 150 mil. I like to take a little break when I've finished one part of the job before I move on to the next part. I find it really important to stop, pause, take a break from thinking and doing, get present. And then when I move on to my next task, I'm much more effective and efficient. After removing the timber cross piece we used on the previous slab, I always give it a bit of a clean up. I often reuse all these forms again later. The steel reinforcement bar and mesh in this slab is going to be done a little differently. Because of the proximity of this slab next to the driveway, we're doubling up the amount of steel we put in the concrete. This is to avoid having cracks in it when cars inevitably drive on it in the future. Because of the odd trapezoid shape of this slab, I'm cutting the steel in place, making sure I leave a 50mm gap around the entire edge next to the timber formwork.
Quiet voices in the night. Time is running out of sight. Lonely wind is passing by. Tries to carry all the whispers that it finds. The walls are listening when we talk, making echoes as we walk. There's no one left but you and me. It's like a made-up place that only we can see. Hold my hand and hear the words I say. Close your eyes and let us fade away. Build a secret place for you and me. Let our minds be caught up in a dream.
So we've got the start of our staircase formed out. I penciled it out over here on our treated timber. We're going to follow that template. Our first step is set by the bottom height of this timber here. Today all I'm trying to do is get this first step in and a bit of the structure on the back side of it. I've built out a bit of a dam out of timber in the middle here. That's just for us to manage our pour today, because I can only get so much concrete in one hit and we've got some bad weather coming. I'm using this aluminium running board as one of my forms because it's dead flat and dead straight. And when we use timbers, sometimes they've got a bit of a bow in them or the concrete can push them out. So this way our wall that's holding in these 4 steps can end up plumb and flat. And then as each concrete slab sets up, we're just going to move this up. So today's just get step 1 in the ground, and next week we can worry about the rest.
Before I fill this form with concrete, I want to go through the procedure of how we constructed it. With accurate measurements, I create a detailed drawing and then transpose this drawing onto the timber work here so we can build directly off it. The idea is to copy my scale drawing onto the timber wall here using my spirit level and a pencil. I'm drawing out the entire staircase accurate to the millimetre. This will ensure that all the steps come out exactly at the same height through the construction process. Having an accurate scale drawing is really handy for calculating materials. I'm now constructing a small form for the concrete at the end of the landing.
Quiet voices in the night. Time is running out of sight. A lonely wind is passing by. Tries to carry all the whispers that it finds. The walls are listening when we talk, making echoes as we walk. There's no one left but you and me. It's like a made-up place that only we can see.
I'm cutting and fitting a piece of timber that's going to create the bottom step of our staircase. I take my time with this process as these pieces are critical for how our whole staircase is going to come out. Once we turn it into concrete, it's really hard to change. I install the second step in place and double check it with my level. This is going to ensure the height for the first step and helps work as an indicator for how much concrete we have to add to get it to the right height.
When you hear the words I say, close your eyes and let us fade away. Build a secret place for you and me. Let our minds be caught up in a dream. Hold my hand and hear the words I say. Close your eyes and let us fade away. Build a secret place for you and me. Let our minds be caught up in a dream. Quiet voices in the night. Time is running out of sight. A lonely wind is passing by. Tries to carry all the whispers that it finds.
One of the main elements of this project was constructing this staircase. It's made out of reinforced concrete and then clad with our sandstone pavers. This will be a series of 4 concrete steps poured on top of each other. I'm deconstructing this formwork gently because we'll be reusing all the elements for the next 3 steps we put on top of it. This vertical 2x4 I'm releasing here is what keeps the aluminium plank in alignment as the staircase goes up. After I've removed the main pieces of formwork and the plastic liner that stops the cement sticking to the aluminium, we get to see how our concrete pour turned out. I'm now removing the inside formwork I constructed. This was necessary because I wasn't able to pour the amount of concrete to fill this entire step. I often have to break up concrete foundation pours into what's manageable for someone doing it by themselves. After removing all the form timbers, we can see that the concrete's come out really solid on the inside. We'll be filling this void with another concrete pour. I need to prepare our aluminium running board that we're using as a form with plastic so the concrete doesn't stick to it. I'm taping this plastic on with duct tape securely so when we're pouring the concrete it doesn't come out of alignment. I'm reseating the aluminium formwork on small timber stumps to raise it to the next step height. Once I'm satisfied it's aligned with the previous concrete pour to give us a nice flat wall, I lock it in with a screw to the timber step form. The piece of timber I'm adding to the step form is what sets the height of the next concrete pour. I'm trying to be really accurate with these pieces of timber, as this will determine how a staircase turns out in the end. I'm positioning the formwork for the next step using the step plan that we penciled out on the planking. After double checking with my tape measure that our step tread is going to come out consistent with the first step, I line this step form to our aluminium form and lock it in with a screw. I do one final check with my tape measure and level to make sure this step's going to come out right. Then I move on to preparing some of the steel mesh and test fit it before we move on to putting our concrete in this form. Whenever I'm adding wet concrete onto previously poured concrete that's set up and dry, I add an ingredient called bondcrete. This helps the new concrete stick to the old concrete. The first part of our concrete pour is to fill the void we left when we poured the first step. I'm adding some of our scrap concrete pieces in here to help fill it out. Whenever I use recycled concrete chunks like this in a fresh pour, I make sure they're completely surrounded with wet concrete so they don't create any weakness in the slab. When I've added enough concrete volume to fill the void, I add the piece of steel mesh I prepared earlier. Reinforced steel mesh and rebar is a key ingredient in the engineering strength of our staircase. Because our foundation is made up of separate concrete pours, they're all held together with the steel. The timber forms that define the steps is our indicator for when we have enough concrete volume in the system. Here you can see, after smoothing out all the concrete with my trowel, how we've created the next step in our staircase. After allowing our concrete to harden, we deconstruct our reusable form pieces in preparation for the next step we're going to be going up. This vertical 2x4 at the end of our staircase is what keeps all our formwork in complete vertical alignment, which will ensure we end up with a completely flat wall, even though we're doing multiple concrete pours. I always really enjoy pulling off the formwork and seeing how the fresh concrete has turned out. With the completion of this second step, we're halfway up our 4-step staircase. Each time we raise the staircase another step, I recut the timber stumps that hold the aluminium form in place. Once the aluminium running board is sitting on these stumps, we lock it into the vertical 2x4 at the end of the staircase that's holding everything in vertical alignment. I then secure the other end into the timber step form. It's critical we have a really strong connection for these points. There aren't very many screws holding this aluminium board on. We're trying to ensure that it's strong enough to hold all the wet concrete when we pour it in, so we don't have any spill outs. The final piece of form we need to install is the next step, which will be the final step in this staircase. I've secured a temporary block to help me get a really accurate alignment on the next step in reference to the drawing we put on the planking. The timber form for the final step is slightly too long. I'm going to have to trim off a couple of mil on the saw. I was expecting having to make this adjustment as the side of the house isn't completely plumb, and technically our staircase gets a little bit narrower as it gets to the top. Now that our form timber fits in place snugly, the next thing I need to do is get the level correct. Here I'm using some packers to pack up this timber to get it exactly plumb with my level. I take my time gently tapping this timber to line it up with the pencil marks on the planking. Then I lock it in with a screw and we move to the other side of the timber. Once all the timber forms are secured, I always double check with my level and tape measure. It's much easier to make an adjustment at this point than when it's solid concrete later. The last thing I need to do is prepare our steel reinforcement mesh, and then we're ready for our next concrete pour.
Another rainy afternoon, I don't know what I'm to do. I just miss you more than anything. It's way too quiet in your house, I'm just wasted on the couch, 'cause I don't wanna feel anything. Wish you'd stayed here beside me. This isn't how it's supposed to be.
So yesterday we poured the second last step, and today we're going to pour out this last top step of this concrete structure for the staircase connecting to this deck. I've used this leapfrog system of setting my step heights. I've built everything 25 mil smaller than it needs to be, so when we clad it with this sandstone, we'll end up perfectly flush with this deck. So this morning we're just going to pull the screws out, raise up our formwork the next height, fill this in with concrete, and then the next couple of days we can start sticking stone on it.
Wish you'd stayed here beside me. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Wish you'd stayed here right with me. I can't shake that feeling that we said goodbye too soon.
I've added expansion joint foam to the deck edge so the timber can expand and contract without causing any problems with our concrete. I go through the process of removing the aluminium form and raising it up for our final step. After checking that the previous concrete pour came out okay, I reassemble the formwork to complete our construction of our staircase foundation.
I know the hour's getting late. I shouldn't sit here contemplating. I just can't stop thinking about it.
This concludes our concrete pour for this step system. We're just going to let this dry for a couple of days, and then we're going to be sticking stone onto it.
Wish you'd stayed here beside me. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Wish you'd stayed here right with me. I can't shake that feeling that we said goodbye too soon.
With all our concrete foundation work complete and the cement set solid, I'm going around the entire perimeter of our structure to remove all the edging formwork so we're prepared for our stonework next week. I really appreciate my new little friend Gus here. He's helped add a lot of fun to what can be a tedious and hard job. But now with all our concrete foundation complete, we can get to the fun part, which is going to be sticking on the stone.
So all the dirt we're excavating from the patio project over there, we're spreading out in this area here because there's a big dip in the lawn here. This is to keep it all flat and trim with our new pathway we're putting in here.
Another rainy afternoon. I don't know what I'm to do. I just miss you more than anything. It's way too quiet in the house. I'm just wasted on the couch, 'cause I don't wanna feel anything.
Now that the concrete foundation is all set and ready, we're going to start laying our sandstone. We're going to be laying stone for the staircase and the pathway back and forth. This way we can let elements dry before we have to add on to them. So to get things started, we're going to lay the first 3 stones in the pathway because these step stones have to lay on the top of them. It also allows us to get the side started. So it's a bit of a Lego puzzle. We're going to get started with these first 3 here.
I'm setting myself up with some pallets to help manage the stone for this pathway. I'm laying these pallets close to the path so they'll be really handy for stone selection. And of course, little Gus is here to help me. Our supply of stone was delivered on a pallet. Unfortunately, it was positioned quite a distance from where we're building this pathway. So I'm using my trailer to transport all the stone closer to where we're going to be working with it. As I lay out the stone pieces on these pallets, I'm starting to organize the stone into some different categories. I'm sorting them by the rough or smooth texture they have, and also by the size. I've set up some additional planks over here to put the small pieces on. I've also got to set up my wet saw because this is what we're going to be cutting all our stone with. I'm positioning it in a comfortable distance away from our work area. After unfolding the legs and locking them into position, I need to get it level. This is part of the safety and practical aspect of operating this tool. I'm filling the wet saw with water. This is how this machine keeps its blade cool and also stops the dust getting into the air. There was a few irregularities created when we poured our concrete. I'm setting up my grinder with a diamond cutting bit to smooth out the concrete steps so they're perfectly flat for our stone to stick to them at the right height.
I remember hearing songs, decades old, but it doesn't matter. Stumble across old memories, try to recall before they shadow. She kept dreaming of a world big enough for everyone. She knew it must rain before it closed.
I'm giving all the concrete a thorough wash down. This is critical for the tile cement to be able to stick properly and for our stone to stay in place.
We're going to start laying our sandstone. So to get things started, we're going to lay the first 3 stones in the pathway, because then I can get these stones on the staircase laid.
To get us started, I'm selecting a nice flat medium-sized stone and setting it up on my wet saw. Using my large set square, I make a 90-degree mark. As this first piece is going to be sitting in the inside corner, I make the cut slowly and carefully. I always wear eye and ear protection when I'm operating my wet saw. This first corner piece is going to need a little notch cut out of it to make room for the edge of the planking we installed on the side of the house. By laying this piece out parallel to the wall, I can mark out the notch with my small set square. I'm using my small grinder with a diamond bit to cut this little notch out, because it's easier and more effective than using the wet saw for such a small cut. After chipping off this corner notch, I return it to the pathway so we can figure out how the next piece of stone is going to fit into this puzzle. There are no strict formulas in crazy paving, but I do have a couple of strategies I'm trying to stick with. By having 3 pieces of stone to cover the 1200mm path, we're setting up a formula that our staircase will be able to follow. I've selected a stone that's already naturally the right shape to fit the space we're trying to fill. It's just going to need a little bit of a trim so it can fit tightly into the first stone we've laid. I'm using my spirit level on the pencil to mark where we want to make the cut. After moving the stone to a more practical area for doing our cut, I transpose the pencil mark onto the back of the stone. The idea is to not cut all the way through, to only cut halfway through. That way when we crack the stone, we end up with a much more natural looking cut on the top. I use pliers to break off any overhanging pieces to straighten out the edge. Here you can see how the stone looks natural where we've made our cut. I return this piece to its original position to scribe the next mark for the second cut we'll make to fit this stone. Like before, I select a piece that naturally covers the space we're trying to fill. This way I don't waste too much material when we trim the stone. Here you can see how I'm transposing the pencil mark onto the back of our piece to make the cut. I'll be using this process for all the pieces I have to fit into the pathway. I return this piece to its final position and then trim the edges on the second piece of stone we put in place. This is to prepare for the future stones we'll be joining on later. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of space on this job site, so I'm going to mix the tile cement quite a distance away from my stone. This will help avoid getting any spills or splatters on our stone as I'm mixing the product. After mixing the ceramicrete to a plaster consistency, I rinse off my tool with a bucket of water I have close by. I mix the tile cement in small batches through this process as it can go off quite quickly, and I need the mortar to remain soft as part of the process of squeezing the stone down properly onto the concrete. I'm tracing out our stones with my pencil so I know where to put the tile cement without creating too much of a mess. I apply a really generous amount of the product directly onto the concrete, then I clean it up with my tile rake. so we have the appropriate thickness to make a good contact with the stone. I'm using packers to set the height of these stones. By using these packers, I can control the slope of the stones. So this way our pathway will have a very gradual slope away from the house for rain drainage. The back of the stone also gets buttered with the tile adhesive. This sandstone has little grooves in the back of it, which is specifically designed for you to push the tile cement in to get a really good bond between the stone and the concrete you're sticking it to. Hitting the stone gently with my rubber hammer helps settle it on top of the packers so it ends up at the right height and the material's squeezed all the way through. By checking it with the small and large level, I'm confident that it's on the right angle to achieve the rain runoff we want. I move on to the next piece of stone, repeating the same process.
She kept dreaming of the day butterflies survive the wheel, even though she could knock down and never show. Dear Lily, where'd you go? Where's your heart at? Why'd you fall back? Lately, your afterglow is shining brighter, waking up an easy head.
I still have a lot of tile cement left over, and it's still soft enough to be quite usable, so I'm going to stick one more stone in to help use up the material. Because this is the high side of the slope we're trying to create for the rain runoff, this stone needs 5mm packers under it to get it to the right height. This smaller stone will match the height of the first stone we put in the corner. After checking with the level that it's all lined up correctly, I clean up the edges with my small trowel and sponge it off. With these stones in place, I now have the foundation to start the cladding on the staircase.
So the plan today is to get these bricks all started. We've got to work in courses just like laying normal bricks, because the tiles we stick on here or the stone we stick on here has to set up before we get the next piece on top. These are now stuck down solid enough that we can work on top of them.
Using my set square and level, I'm double checking the height of our steps. The finished height is supposed to be 160mm. The concrete foundation of the step is measuring at 135mm. That's going to allow me 25mm for our stone and tile cement to end up at the finished height of 160mm. So everything's on target. This means the stones we're going to be using in our brick pattern that lay on the front of the steps need to be cut 135mm wide. Here I've found a stone that's very close to that measurement. It's slightly wider than we need, so I'll trim it on the wet saw, and it should be a good start to all the bricks we're going to be cutting for this staircase. The stone for the staircase is going to be laid out differently from the crazy paving pathway. It's going to be laid in a brick or a tile pattern, so we need to turn this sandstone into little bricklets or tiles. I start this process by creating a straight edge on one side of the stone by doing a rip with my wet saw all the way down one side. Using my saw clamp, I set it up so it's 135mm from the blade by measuring it with a little set square. Once I have this saw clamp locked in at the right width, all the bricks I need to cut for the first course will come out at the same thickness. Once I've made all the necessary adjustments and double checked one last time with my set square, I cut the stone. I'll be using this as a test piece to see if it fits properly. I return the stone to the position it's going to be laid in and double check the heights come out. I want this to be exact. We're going to be creating a formula here, and all the bricks for the entire first course of the stairway that wrap around the whole thing, I want them all to be the same height. I'm satisfied 135mm is the right height to cut all these bricklets at. Now I need to work out the width of the bricks on the front of this first step so they line up neatly with the first 3 stones we put on the pathway. I take some measurements and start checking our supply of stone to find one that's going to be wide enough.
People knew her by her will to make it whatever she put her mind to. Late night hours up the hill, serving coffee to strangers, talking about revenue. She kept dreaming of a world big enough for everyone. She knew it must rain before it grows.
This pencil mark will act as a guide for when I'm cutting it on the wet saw. I return it to its position to make sure that our cut has come out accurately. I'm double checking with my small level. It's really important that all our steps come out exactly at the same height. That's why I'm spending so much time to get this exact. With the centerpiece complete, I'm now going to cut 2 more to fit either side of it.
She kept dreaming of a world big enough for everyone. She knew it must rain before it rose. She kept dreaming of the day butterflies survive the wheel, even though she could knock down and never show. Dear Lily, where'd you go? Where's your heart at? Why'd you fall back? Lately your afterglow is shining brighter, waking up uneasy head.
One of the systems I'll be using throughout this entire process is to dry fit a batch of stones in place before we start cementing them on the wall or on the pathway. I'm using some scrap pieces of timber to hold the sandstone tiles in place, so I know I've got a really tight fit when it comes to sticking them on the wall. Ceramicrete tile cement has a limited time you can work with it, so I mix it in small batches as needed. To achieve a really strong bond between the sandstone and the concrete, I want to make sure I get a really good coverage of the tile cement product on both surfaces. I use my trowel and paint scraper to apply a really thick bed of the material across the entire face of the concrete. I take my time and use small blobs of material and work slowly and steady so I don't get any unwanted tile cement on the previously laid stone. I'm also using this towel to help catch any spills and to stop the stone from getting scratched. After getting a nice thorough coverage on my concrete and cleaning up any spills, I use my tile rake to scrape off the excess. The tile rake has notches in it. This helps keep control of the amount of material we're leaving on the concrete. I butter the back of our sandstone bricklet with a really generous amount of material. This particular sandstone product has special grooves cut in the back side of it, which are designed to adhere to our tile cement, so I want to push them all the way into these nooks and crannies. I want at least 3 mil thickness of material on this bricklet. Once I've tidied up all the edges, making sure I don't leave any bare patches, I squeeze the tile in place. By tapping gently with my rubber hammer, I can line up the tile into the correct position. I double check with my spirit level to make sure it's vertical, and then adjust it with my rubber hammer to get it just right. I repeat the process for the entire first course that wraps around the concrete staircase.
When the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. There's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back. You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been.
To use up our leftover tile cement, I'm going to stick another piece of stone on the pathway. The idea is to add enough tile cement so it's thicker than the packers we've set for the right height of the stone. Once I've got enough product on the concrete foundation, I butter the back of the stone. I don't want too much cement on the back of the stone, just a nice thin coverage. I return the packers to their original position, pushing them into the tile cement. The tile cement should be sitting higher than the packers. This is what's going to make the contact with the stone and create a really good adhesion in our system. By pushing the sandstone down firmly onto our foundation, you should be able to feel the tile cement squeezing out from the sides. When I'm satisfied the stone's pushed all the way down onto the packers, I double check with my small level to make sure we've got a nice flat join. We're not necessarily going to get a perfect match between one stone and the other because of the unevenness in the natural stone product, but I'm just trying to get it as close as I practically can. I'm cleaning the stone with a wet sponge. I don't want this cement to set up on the stone or stain it, so I try and keep it clean as we go. I'm using an extra thin trowel to tidy up these edges. This tool easily fits in the gaps we have between our stones. When the stone is squeezed into place, we end up with some excess on some of the edges and also some small voids. This small trowel helps me tidy up all the edges so we have a nice solid contact. I'm using a combination of a scourer and a sponge to clean up the piece.
You let the world know that what has been has been, and there's no use looking back, going back, wishing back.
I need to periodically replenish our stone supply from the pallet at the front of the property.
You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows.
The first course of bricks is set up strong enough for me to start working on the end of the staircase. I want to use one piece of stone for this end bottom piece. I use my spirit level to mark out a pencil line so when we set this stone it's plumb to the rest of the course. I take a rough measurement so I can find a piece of stone that's going to fit all the way across. The formula I use for stone selection is usually based on which stone will create the least amount of waste when I cut it down to size. When I've found a stone that looks appropriate, I do a quick double check with my tape measure to make sure it's going to fit the dimensions we need. I move it to my wet saw and using my set square, I mark out the dimensions we need to cut it down to.
When the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. There's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back. You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh.
This corner joint has a bit of an overhang due to the roughness on the piece of stone we're attaching it to, so I'm going to custom cut a little notch. It's easier to use my small grinder than the wet saw to make these small irregular cuts. With the entire first course of the staircase complete, we're going to move on to putting the horizontal pieces on the first step. For design purposes and aesthetics, I want these horizontal stones to match the bricklets we put on the front part of the step. I created a system when I laid out all these stones on the pallets, with the largest ones being closest to the road. I check the piece of stone I've selected with my tape measure, and when I'm satisfied it's got enough to cover the area we want, I use my set square to pencil out a line as a guide to help me cut it on the wet saw. To help the tile cement blend better with the sandstone, I'm putting a sandstone pigment inside the tile cement mix.
Sipping coffee under the apple tree, it's gentlemanly. Well, you're a good man, quite the best man, a real fine man.
I'm using the same process to stick these stair pieces down as we did the crazy paving. The only difference is it's a larger area of mortar and stone to stick down in one session. As always, the most important part is to have complete coverage on all the surfaces so we get a really strong adhesion from our stone and concrete.
Feel like the air and breathe. Lift up your head and lead. Count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please. Try to reminisce over me. Know that
these large square paving stones for our stairs is to make sure they end up really tight together, so the outside edge lines up with the bricks that we previously laid on the side of the staircase.
Tonight will turn minutes into days, and nothing's gonna make me look away.
After letting it set up overnight, the next morning I wanted to clean up a little more of the tile cement residue. Most of the ceramicrete's still soft enough to be scrubbed off with a scourer. Some of the stubborn pieces, I'm using my paint scraper to get them off. Most cement and mortar products can be removed the following day after you've applied them. Little Gus, the property owner's dachshund, often says hello to me first thing in the morning when I get to the job site, which is a nice way to start the day. You can see here how easily the cement scrapes off, only being a day old. I'm paying particular attention to the steps, as when you're walking up the staircase, this is what you look at. By taking a look at everything we got stuck on the concrete foundation yesterday, I can double check for any cement spills and make a plan for the materials I want to get stuck on the foundation today. My goal is to stick on this next course of bricklets on our concrete foundation. I've selected and cut all the stone we're going to be using for this session and dry fit it to the wall as we did before. Here I'm just double checking the corner pieces to make sure we have a really tight alignment. Now I'm ready to mix up some of the ceramicrete and stick these to the wall. I have these planks of timber lined up on the bottom of the wall. This gives me somewhere to place the bricklets without getting them dirty whilst we're doing our cementing process. It's important to dampen all the materials before we start cementing them. The cement adheres much better to damp material than to dry material. I'm slightly changing the process of how we apply our ceramicrete on this side of the wall, due to the way our formwork system left a relatively rough surface for us to stick the tiles to. I'm not using the tile rake, instead I'm creating a 3 to 5 mm layer of smooth ceramicrete for us to stick the tile on. After buttering our bricklet and placing it on the wall, sometimes it doesn't feel quite right because I haven't got enough cement underneath it. If it doesn't feel squishy, I pull the tile off, add some more cement, and then squeeze it into place. This time there's a lot more cement squeezing out the side of the tile, and it has the squishy, suctiony feel that you want when you've got a really solid contact. I tap it in with my rubber hammer to make sure it's got all its air bubbles out of it, and then clean up the excess with my wet sponge.
You said, let me tell you everything I've seen, the friends I've made, and then you tell me how you've been. Look a little closer, it's been quite some time, but you gotta let me know if I'm out of line.
After restaging my setup around the corner of our foundation, I continue the same process and quickly run into the same issue of not having enough cement under my tile brick. This is a feel thing. You can feel when you don't have enough cement because it doesn't feel solid. So I just remove it, add more cement, and return it to its position on the wall. We should have cement squeezing out the edges when we've got enough mud behind it.
There's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way.
When you've got enough ceramicrete on the back of your stone, it should squeeze out a little bit on the sides. And then I'm using my rubber hammer to help it match the flatness of the stones next to it. When I'm satisfied it's sitting in the right position, I clean it up with my wet sponge.
There's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way.
With our wall part of the staircase halfway complete, I return my attention to the crazy paving pathway. Although we're not laying these pavers to an absolute fixed pattern, I'm sticking to a formula as a guide to how we lay these pieces out. I want to be able to cover the width of our 1200mm wide pathway with 3 stones whenever possible. The stone I'm selecting here should be large enough to take us all the way to the edge of the pathway. By placing it next to the stones we've already laid, I can see the corner already fits our layout. After getting an idea of where I need to trim it to fit it in place, I mark it with my pencil and level as a guide for my wet saw cut. With this large piece fitting nicely, I just need to cut a small piece to fill the void above it next to the edge of the pathway.
Look a little closer, it's been quite some time. But you gotta let me know if I'm out of line. But there's some words that I just wanna hear you say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day, and then I'm on my way. Yeah. Yes, I'm on my way.
I let these stones set in place overnight before I move on to working on the second step of our staircase. The pattern I've chosen for these steps is for the front and the top of the steps to match each other's edges in the layout. To continue the offset brick pattern we've established, the second step's going to have 4 pieces to cover its width. After selecting and cementing on 4 nice pieces for the front of the step, I do a little clean up in preparation for laying our horizontal pieces on top.
There's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way.
It's important to scrub this tile cement off the following day, as it hardens up quite quickly and it's really hard to get off a few days later. Little Gus periodically checks in on what I'm doing and helps to remind me to take a break from my work.
You said, let me tell you everything I've seen, friends I've made, and then you tell me how you've been.
The stone we need for the top of this step is going to match the pattern we've established on the front of the step. So I pencil out the position and then select some raw material that's going to fit those sizes.
But there's some words that I just want to hear you say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day.
I want to preserve as much of the grain in this stone, so I'm cutting it as close to the edge as I can get away with.
A bit naive and so eager to please. You know I played for love, but it got me on my knees.
To create a really tight join between our stones, I float this next piece of stone over the pre-existing stone that's been fit tight into the corner using some 10mm packers so it can kind of hover above the stone as I scribe it with my pencil. By using this pencil line as a guide to trim this stone on my wet saw, we can see how we've got a really tight, accurate join between the 2 stones. I repeat this process for the other 4 stones we'll need for this step, and then cement them in place with our sandstone coloured mortar.
Breaking feedback, unless I'm gonna stay right here. Stay until it disappears.
This morning I want to talk about our design layout. I've changed the configuration so this piece is going to be wider than this piece, and these 2 side pieces will be narrower than what we've set on this bottom one, just to keep it a little more organic and random as it goes up this staircase. We've sort of set a rhythm here with 500mm in the middle and then 350 and 300 on either side on this bottom one. Then we went to 4 stones just to offset it, to give it a bricky pattern. So on this next step, I want to repeat this pattern, but sort of reverse it to keep everything a little random and organic looking.
I'm replenishing our stone supply, so we'll have plenty to choose from when we continue our staircase and crazy paved pathway. I like to set up a clear plan of how I'm going to fabricate the next section. Having specific measurements for the materials we're going to need to cover this step helps me select the right material. I go through the normal steps of penciling out the shape of the stone I'm going to cut on my wet saw. I only cut the bottom and one side of the piece at this stage, as I'm going to need to check it in place before we continue the rest of the cuts. When I return the stone to the position it's going to end up in, I can see I've already got a slight problem I have to address. There's a small bump in the stone that we'd previously laid, so I'm going to have to cut a notch out of this new piece of stone to get a nice flush join. Our pigmented tile cement will fill this gap. The important thing is this new stone's going to sit flush and flat on the existing stone. I can now make accurate pencil marks on the back of this stone to ensure that it ends up flush with our step. By carefully aligning my pencil marks with my wet saw blade, I can line up the stone for an accurate cut. I make the cut in a couple of passes. This helps the accuracy of my cut and helps stop the imperfections in the stone from pushing the blade out of alignment. I continue to return the stone to its position and double check that it's lining up correctly. Now that I'm happy with the height of the stone matching our stair tread, I work on the sides of the stone to make sure it's going to match our pencil marks we put down earlier. With our centerpiece of stone complete, I repeat the process for the last third stone that we're going to put on the edge of the stairway.
Back up the drive a bit, could you see what this is? This is a part of it all. Over and over, injustice to injury. This is a part of it all.
With the preparation of our stone complete, I now get to cement them in place. This is actually my favourite part of the process. There's a lot of fiddly work in getting all the stones to the right size. Sticking them on's quite simple and easy, so I try and slow down and enjoy the meditative aspect of this process.
Who told you that you were no good? There's no use in trying, and even if you could, it wouldn't come out like it should. This stubborn kudzu just covers these words. Could you listen to somebody else? Dig in your heels and spread the disease. Back up the drive a bit, could you see what this is? This is a part of it all. Over and over, injustice to injury. This is a part of it all.
Letting the stones set up on our steps, we're going to move our attention back to the crazy paving pathway. I've selected and cut 3 large pieces, which continues the formula we're trying to stick with in this pattern. I'm using 6mm packers under our piece of stone as a way to make it slightly higher than the other edge of the path. This is going to help with our rain drainage. After a bit of a clean up with my spatula and sponge, we move on to the next piece. I'm using 5mm packers under this piece compared to the 6mm on the previous to help it sit lower in the pathway. I lay the stone back on the packers and double check with my level before we get any mortar involved. When I'm satisfied these are the right packers to get it to the correct height, we add mortar to the concrete and the stone and place the packers back in the mortar, butter the back of our stone with tile cement and then return it to its position on top of the packers. Pushing the stone down firmly until we can feel it sit on the packers and we have mortar squeezing out the sides of the stone. I clean up the edges with my small trowel and paint scraper and then clean off any excess with my wet sponge and move on to the next piece.
Dig in your heels and spread the disease. You're spreading the disease.
still have a little bit of tile cement left over, so I'm going to stick in one more small piece of stone just to finish off the day session. This small stone will extend this triangle shape onto the larger stone I'd laid previously. It's going to help me set the pattern for the stones to come. Part of our formula for the pathway is to have a mixture of small and large stones, trying to keep the large stones in the centre where you walk so it has a more stable surface. The next day I remove my temporary barricades and wash everything down. I advise putting temporary barricades up to stop people accidentally walking on your stone when it's not set up. I take a quick inspection of everything we laid the day before in case it needs cleaning, and then we move on to the steps. I'm checking with my tape measure to see how bigger pieces we're going to need for the coverage of this step. The centerpiece is going to be the largest one, so I'm going to focus on finding the right piece of stone for that first. As I've mentioned previously, as I resupply our stock of stone, I already start the sorting process for which pieces we're going to use where. I want the horizontal step pieces to be really smooth and flat, so by the process of elimination, it only leaves me certain pieces to choose from. Once I've established the piece of stone is going to be big enough, I mark it out with my pencil as a guide for where I'm going to cut it on the wet saw. This is the first piece of stone I'm cutting today, so I have to make sure my wet saw has enough water in it. It's important to keep the water reservoir full, as this is how the wet saw cuts dust free and it keeps the blade cool.
Back up the drive a bit, could you see what this is? This is a part of it all. Over and over, injustice to injury, this is a part of it all. Could you hike back to it, fight with it, sit with it, this is a part of it all.
With the main centerpiece cut to size, I now repeat the same process for the two side pieces. By penciling out the size of the piece we need, we can see that this piece is only just big enough.
Who told you that it was too late? When was it that you started leaning that way? 4 tires cut into the clay. It dries up and now there's just one road to take. It's growing up over with green. So easy to drive on, but not what it seems. The poison is spilling upstream, and it's taking out every living thing. Every living thing.
By test fitting these first two pieces, we can see they line up perfectly with the front of the step. Now I just need to find and cut a piece for the last piece on the edge of the step. Another reason I pencil out the cut marks on our stone is to make sure that the natural stone's got enough coverage for the piece we want to cut out of it. This stone here is really close but doesn't quite have enough material. I don't want to waste any of my stone by cutting a small piece out of one of the bigger pieces. Sometimes it can take a while to find the appropriate stone. This one here is close, but it's got a big defect on the corner, so we won't be using it. And this one here looks really good, except it has a crack in the middle of it. Eventually I went out to my pallet and grabbed a piece of stone from there so we could move on. After measuring and marking out this stone, I can see we'll get our piece without wasting too much.
Back up the drive a bit, could you see what this is? This is a part of it all. Over and over, injustice to injury, this is a part of it all.
With these 3 pieces of stone fitting really nicely for our last step, I'm now going to add packers underneath them to get them to the right height. I want the stones sitting relatively flat, but with a slight slope leaning to the outside of the step for rain drainage. I don't want puddles building up on the inside corner of these steps. I'm using my small level to help indicate if I've got the packer thickness right. If it doesn't look quite right, I swap out the packer for a different sized one until I get it to the level I need. I keep track of where the packers should be placed by putting them on top of the stones. That way when we put the ceramicrete down, I can return the packers to the correct position. I moisten all the materials down with my hose. I don't want to make it too wet, but we want to have a good amount of moisture to help our stone adhere to the foundation securely. After raking back the cement, I return the packers to the original position. I thoroughly buttered the back of our stone with a tile adhesive, place it back on the packers and double check with my level that it's come out correctly. When I'm satisfied it's in the right position, we move on to fixing the other stones in place.
Can I go to sleep, buried in my chair? The only thing that's left. If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final, I just take a bow.
My system in this project has been to allow certain segments to dry and set up solidly before we move on to the next section. This is really important so we don't bump loose any of the stones before the tile cement's had time to harden. My plan is to get most of the bricks secured in place on the side of the concrete platform. It's important for me to get this first brick in exactly the right position. I'll be connecting the vertical pieces for the last step to this piece of stone later, and I want to have as small a gap as possible. As I'm sticking the rest of these bricklets onto our concrete foundation, I'm double checking with my level to make sure we've got a really vertical alignment. I'm not sticking the bricks all the way to the end of the wall, as I want these bricks to set in place before we fiddle around with the corner pieces. After washing off any tile cement that ended up in the wrong places, I give the entire area a full hose down in preparation for us setting up for the final step layout. I need to map out the top of the step or the landing before we do the pieces on the front of the step, as they all align together. I'm using where the edge of the wooden deck meets our concrete foundation as a guide to how I want to lay the stones out on the top. It helps to have the measurements written out where I'm going to be laying the stone for easy reference later. I select and cut the stones to size and start sticking them onto the step. I wanted to be able to stick these pieces on whilst the previous pieces were still a little soft, in case we needed to adjust the very end piece to make a really nice corner join. After a little clean up with our wet sponge and my little helper Gus, we move on to finishing off this top course by adding the corner pieces we left out earlier.
Hey, darling, can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city life. Hey, darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, wanna see it now. Pack our bags and get in that car, leave a little note and we'll drive real far. Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. Yeah, the countryside is so pretty, with the wind blowing in your hair. We can look back someday. Baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey. Come on now and take my hand.
While the tile cement sets up on the staircase, we're going to move our attention back to the pathway. I already have some stones selected and cut that fit our formula for having 3 stones across the pathway. One of the key parts of this process is managing how much tile cement we have under the stone. Here I'm using 5mm packers to get the stone to the right height. I'm going to need slightly more than 5mm of tile cement to create a good contact between the stone and the concrete. On this stone I'm adding a little extra cement to make sure it's sitting higher than the packers. I want to put the stone in place so I can feel the tile cement squishing out, so I know I've got a good contact. I clean up any excess tile cement off these stones whilst it's still soft before we move on to cutting and fitting an extra stone to use up our excess tile cement.
We can look back someday. Baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey. Come on now and take my hand. Hey, darling, can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city life. Hey, darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, wanna see it now.
I was going to lay a couple more stones with the leftover cement. We're getting rained off, so it's enough for today. Come back tomorrow.
Let's get out, we can leave this city.
So last week we completed laying all the stones on the uprights. So today we're going to be sticking the pieces on top, which will finish off this whole staircase element. As we use up our stone, I pick up batches on my trailer and bring them in. And as you can see today, we're starting to get quite depleted. So I picked up a batch of stone, we'll unload that, lay it out. Then I'll have material for doing the top of this staircase.
Hey, darling, you know we're gonna have a really good time, driving in the middle of the night when the stars are bright.
I'm doing my standard morning wash down and scrubbing off any excess tile cement I missed yesterday when we laid these pieces. The towels I lay out to work on are really important for avoiding any scratches or stains on the stones we've already laid. I try and clean most of the tile cement off as we're laying them. It can be hard to get the pieces on the inside corners whilst the tiles are still wet, because if you scrub them too hard you'd push them out of alignment. So it's more effective to let them set up overnight, and the following morning we can scrape and scrub them a lot harder. I need to give our stair platform a thorough scraping to remove any bumps that might misalign the stones we're going to lay on top. I'm double checking the measurements for the size of stones we're going to need to cover this area. And then I take a look at the new stones I laid out to pick the appropriate ones. We're looking for extra flat, extra nice stones. This is a feature area of our structure, so it's worth taking our time to select the right ones. Our stones on the top step and platform are going to require a little expansion gap around the edge next to the house and the edges next to the deck. This is going to give the different materials room to expand and contract without causing any cracks in our stone. I'm using 10mm packers to set a consistent gap around the whole edge of the stone.
Lay down, be still.
So after custom cutting all these pieces, we're ready to stick them down. We've also spent a lot of time putting packers underneath to get things to the right height. So I'm going to start with this one and work our way over. I'm going to leave this one in place because I want to sort of use it to match the height. Placing the packers in the same pattern, so hopefully I'll get them roughly back in the same spot when we get the mud on here.
on the final step set up as I return to the continuation of the pathway section. One of the reasons it's important to let the stones set up solidly before adding another batch is in the process of designing as we go. I often want to lay a piece of stone over the previously laid stones to get an idea how it's going to fit in place. In keeping with our formula of mixing different sized stones, here I'm adding a really large one next to two previously laid medium-sized ones. This is what's going to create a harmonious pattern in the pathway. When the large stone is cut and fit in place, I bridge the gap between the two large stones with a smaller one. We can see here how there's a design rhythm forming in our pathway that we're going to try and keep consistent throughout the rest of the length. So to keep this design formula going, I'm going to add a really large one in the center and then custom cut medium to small pieces to fit around it. As the pathway grows in length, I approach my first expansion joint. This requires a little careful thought to make it work correctly. I need the expansion joint in the concrete to line up with the edges of the stones. This way, when the expansion joint possibly moves in the future, it won't crack any of the stones. To help hide this seam that we need in the pathway for engineering purposes, I laid the stones out with seams that run all the way across in other areas to help this seam blend in and not stick out. The other courses I put in the pathway are at a slightly different angle to also help break the pattern up, so this becomes an invisible part of the pathway.
One way, gonna lay down, be still, won't waste another tear. Wait till it disappears. Can I go to sleep, buried in my chest? The only thing that's left. If you have love, you wanna give me some.
With all the stones cut to fit up to our expansion joint, I now cement them in place.
Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final I just take a bow. While it all
Part of the practical aspect of our stone design layout is having these large ones in the middle, then keeping the smaller stones on the side. This helps create a practical and smooth pathway. After laying our stones up to the expansion joint, I still have some ceramicrete left over, so I'll stick a couple more stones in to finish off this session.
I'm gonna stay right here. Stay till it disappears.
We got the last of our 4 steps set in place. This is going to set the pattern to how we fill out this platform area. We'll be connecting a piece to this cornerstone of the step in line with the deck edge and adding an extra large stone to anchor the end of the platform. I'll then fill the area in between with the same pattern of bricklets we used on the side of our platform. I select and cut to size some of the nicer stones we have to choose from, as this is a highly visual area of our structure. As the small stone bricklets are generated from the offcuts of the larger stones, I'll be creating more of these as we continue the main pathway. My next challenge on the crazy paving pattern is how to burn up some of these medium-sized stones. I've just laid a couple of really large stones in the pathway, so following our formula of mixing large and small together, I want to put a row of medium to small stones across the pathway. I lay the uncut stones directly on the pathway to get an idea if they're going to fit in place. Once I've selected a group of stones I think are going to work, I lay them across the pathway overlapping each other to get an idea of how I'm going to cut them together to fit the area we want to cover. I'm starting with the stone on the far left, custom cutting it to fit into the pathway, but trying to keep as much material as possible so I don't lose any coverage as I work my way across. I'm following the natural shape of this stone to mark my cut point to get the most out of it. I continue this process across the pathway, scribing each new stone to fit the previous stone until we get to the edge of the path. After effectively using up some of our smaller stones, I'm moving on to dealing with the extra large stones I have. Some of the large pieces like this are too heavy to manage and also won't fit on my wet saw safely, so I need to cut them in half. I'm cutting them on a 20 to 30 degree angle, as the pieces in our pathway often have that kind of angle in them. So this way we might get lucky and be able to use one of the corners after I've cut them down. I'm using my small grinder with a diamond cutting bit to cut these stones. Being extra careful not to cut all the way through. I only want to cut halfway through the stone and then crack the stone. This way we get a natural cracked edge for use later in the pathway.
I have seen many places where the beauty never ends, but I don't have to be chasing every dream that I have. Oh, no. 'Cause the thing is, I've got more love here than I can bear. Ooh. Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you.
One of the ways I manage a really large batch of custom cut stones on the pathway is to trace out all the stones with a pencil onto the concrete and then move them off to the side in the same pattern that they're laid out on the path. This way I can keep track of where the stones need to return once I'm cementing them down. I can now set myself up to stick the stones down with our ceramicrete. After laying most of the sandstone we're going to have on this pathway, I've started to develop a really comfortable formula and system for this layout. It becomes a really enjoyable process. I don't have to think too hard about any step in this procedure. I just follow the formulas we've set in motion. The different size stone pattern that we've got started, the packers we use to get everything to the right height, and making sure I get enough tile adhesive under each stone to stick it down securely.
Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you. Been walking down the street so many times, my feet know every brick and stone. Could wear a blindfold. No matter what I do, I'm coming home to you. And I don't know why, don't know why, don't know why, I'm always feeling homesick. Oh, all I know, all I know, all I know is this is where my heart is.
There can be a few variables with what size packers I use under a stone to get it to the right height. The small stone I'm setting right now is really close to the edge we're trying to keep a high angle on for rain drainage. The sandstone product also has a variation in its thickness. In this case I'm having to use 8mm of packers to get this stone to the right height. The largest stone I'm cementing to the pathway next fits more into our formula. I'm using 5mm packers on the low side and 6mm packers on the high side to create a slight angle for our rain drainage. Cutting all the new stones for our pathway has generated enough off-cut material for me to create the bricklets I need to finish the stair platform. So once I've tidied up the edges of this stone, I'm going to move my attention back to the staircase.
When the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back.
After getting the first course of bricklets set along the edge of the deck, I'm now working out the layout for the next two courses, and little Gus has decided he wants to help me choose which bricks will be best. The idea was to generate these bricklets from the offcuts of the larger stones, so I created a stockpile of stones with various textures. This way I can experiment with different combinations and layouts to come up with something that's going to look good. I'm using the layout of the first 3 stones we've set in place as a guide to align the other stones. This is going to be part of creating a nice tight brick pattern.
You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know what has been has been. There's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back. Cutting grass and chopping wood can be romantic. Sipping coffee under the apple tree.
The most important part of the process of sticking these stones down is going to be getting them to the right height. I'm using the previously laid course of bricks as a guide to the height we want to set them at. I'm applying an extra deep layer of tile cement and then pushing the bricks into them until they match the height of the previously laid course. I can tell I'm getting a good contact between the stone and the concrete by the amount of tile cement that's oozing out the sides. When all the bricklets are in place, I clean up the edge with my spatula and then give it an extra thorough clean with the wet sponge, as there's a lot of excess tile cement on the stone. I'll complete the last course of these bricklets later when this course has had time to set up.
You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing.
I'm going to take you through the 2 different processes I used for creating a natural cracked edge for our stone. After only cutting halfway through the stone with our wet saw, I align the cut of the stone with the edge of a heavy piece of scrap timber and then tap it with a hammer. It should crack along our cut line. I then use pliers to pull away the extra stone lip that's left. When we turn the stone over and look at the top side, we can see we've created a nice rustic edge. The alternate method is, after cracking the stone in the same way with our hammer on a piece of timber, I use a hammer and chisel and work my way along the edge, gently chipping off the lip of the stone. This creates a bit more of a rough looking finished edge, but fits well with our rustic pathway. Here we can see how the roughened edge turned out on the finished pathway with the gravel filled in the gaps.
Quiet voices in the night. Time is running out of sight. A lonely wind is passing by. Tries to carry all the whispers that it finds. The walls are listening when we talk.
With the bricklets that we laid earlier on the stair platform dry, it's time to finish off the last course.
There's no one left but you and me. It's like a made-up place that only we can see. Hold my hand and hear the words I say. Close your eyes and let us fade away. Build a secret place for you and me. Let our minds be caught up in a dream.
This completes the stair platform part of our project. The idea was to integrate this staircase and the sandstone path by cladding it with the same natural stone material. I created sandstone tile bricklets on my wet saw, primarily from offcuts and also stone that was too lumpy to use in the pathway. The size and shape of these bricklets was determined by the height of our 4 steps in the staircase. The stone brick pattern has a mixture of sizes in it. I used large and long pieces for the stair treads as a way to start the pattern. I wanted each stair tread to have enough coverage to be overlapped by the step above. The front of the steps had a different layout formula. I wanted the stones on the front of the steps to match the size of the stones on the top of the steps, to give the steps a really solid look. By matching the joins in the stone on the front and top, I was trying to simulate the look of a staircase built out of solid sandstone blocks. I continued this theme on the stair platform, having 2 large pieces of stone to anchor either end, and filled out the middle with bricklets that matched the side of the platform staircase. All these elements of form and function was to bring about a practical way to get from ground height to the top of this deck, while also adding an attractive design element to the existing house structure. We're going to complete the crazy paved path all the way up to the driveway, then fill the gaps between our sandstone with a specialised gravel cement mixture, and finish off our construction by rebuilding the bench seat we removed when we started this project, using a counter-levered structural system to give it an element of modern architecture to help it blend with the existing house. I'm laying out a fresh piece of stone right where our next expansion joint lies. Like in the previous expansion joint, the stones have to have a gap here to allow the slab underneath to be able to slightly move around without cracking our stone on top. This expansion joint is different from the previous one in that it has an angle change to accommodate the slight ramp we're putting at the very end of the path to segue with the driveway. As I lay out my stone pattern approaching these expansion joints, I always make sure to leave myself enough room for the pattern to make a transition over this join that's not too visually disruptive. I don't want to have tiny pieces of stone interrupting the pathway on these expansion joints. You can see here how our pattern of large and small stones has plenty of room to make this transition. After custom fitting our sandstone up to the transition point, I cut and lay some stones to establish the pattern on the beginning of the ramp. For efficiency in this process, I try and cut and fit stones in the morning and then cement them down in the afternoon. That way they're set up solid for us to continue the process on the next day.
I'm gonna let the past be filled with smoke, and I will try to fix what has been broken, and take this weight off my shoulders, cause I know yesterday ain't coming back. I'm gonna let the past stay in the cold. I will listen to the ocean, let its unsaid words be spoken, and I'll let my mind be carried by the waves. Oh, I will open up my eyes so I can see the light. Oh, and I'll try to spread my wings so I can fly.
After checking the measurements on an appropriate stone for this final corner piece, I put it in place so I can get a visual concept of how it's going to lay out. Because this stone is going to be the start of our pathway, it's really important to spend a bit of time on getting it right, marking it out appropriately and cutting it exactly to size.
Will open up my eyes so I can see the light. Oh, and I'll try to spread my wings so I can fly. Oh, and the darkness starts to fade, feels like things are gonna go my way. Sunshine in the day. I'm gonna let the past be filled with smoke, and I will try to fix what has been broken, and take this weight off my shoulders, cause I know yesterday ain't coming back. I'm gonna let the past stay in the cold. I will listen to ocean, let its unsaid words be spoken, and I'll let my mind be carried by the
last two stones of our pathway cut to size and fit in place, I'm now going to prepare to stick them down by mixing up some tile cement. As usual, to avoid any splatters getting on our finished stone, I do this process a considerable distance from the finished pathway, and it looks like little Gus is on hand to help me out for these last two stones. After setting up my packers and tools in a convenient spot, I flip the stones up and give the concrete a thorough wash down. As we've done throughout this process, it's all part of making the cement adhere properly to the surfaces. I always try 5 or 6 mil packers to start with under every stone. After checking the sandstone with my level, I swap the thickness of the packers out until I can get the stone to the right level. In this case, we're having to add quite a thick layer of packers to get it to the right height. This is due to the fact that this concrete slab is sloping into the natural ground, and there's a bit of adjustment here to get the top of the sandstone to match nicely with the natural ground height. With the height set, I set up to cement the stone in place.
Will open up my eyes so I can see the light. Oh, and I'll try to spread my wings so I can fly.
I'm having to add an extra thick layer of tile cement to give us enough material to fill between the bottom of the stone and the top of our concrete.
I'm gonna let the sun shine in the day. I'm gonna let the past be filled with smoke, and I will try to fix what has been broken, and take this weight off my shoulders, 'cause I know yesterday ain't coming back. I'm gonna let the past stay in the cold. I will listen to the ocean, let its unsaid words be spoken, and I'll let my mind be carried by the waves. Oh, I will open up my eyes so I can see the light. Oh, and I'll try to spread my wings so I can fly. Oh, and the darkness starts to fade, feels like things are gonna go my way. I'm gonna let the sun shine in the day.
The principal reason for this pathway was to add this access point into the house through this deck that was pre-existing. So the staircase is all finished and our pathway has all been laid. It's had a few days to dry. The next step is for us to fill these cracks with our special gravel mixture. We want to kind of have a rustic, gravelly fill look. The material's a lot darker than the stone, so it'll create a nice contrast in our pattern. So I've brought an industrial vacuum cleaner. We'll blow out all the dust and leaves from these cracks. We'll be using my cement mixer to make up our special gravel recipe. Then we just simply fill all these cracks to just slightly under the top surface of the stone. Today we're going to really enjoy this last step in our process. It's very meditative and a real pleasure, as it's the last major step in all the work we've done to get it to this point. This will be the gravel we're using. We're using a mixture of small gravel chips and bluestone dust, mixed with general purpose cement to bind it together. But if we get the recipe right, we're going to have a very rustic, stony, gravelly look on the top. We don't want it to look like cement.
Breaking stay till it disappears.
After using my vacuum to blow all the dust and leaves out of our cracks, I set myself up for making our special mixture we're going to be filling between the stones. I'll be using my cement mixer to blend all the ingredients together. General purpose cement is what's going to bind the two ingredients together of bluestone dust and pink gravel chips. My cement is a little lumpy due to moisture content, so I'm sifting it through a piece of mesh. This is going to help the dry cement blend with the other ingredients. The ratio of this dry mix is going to be 3 parts stone dust and gravel chips to 1 part general cement. It's important to stick to a formula for this mixture in case we have to make a second batch. That way the second batch will match the colour of the first one.
If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final I just take a bow. While it all falls apart, guess you can't win them all. Oh no.
I'm going to show you 2 effective ways to get our gravel mix into the stone gaps. The first one involves us using a special jig I constructed to help manage our gravel and cement mix. The jig helps direct the gravel mix deep into the cracks of the pathway without getting any on the top of the stone. Using a combination of a thin trowel and a small broom, we work the mixture into the cracks until it's filled to just under the height of the top of the stone. I repeat the process of filling the jig, working it in with the trowel, sliding it along the course of the stone. When I've got enough material inside the crack, I sweep it off with my small broom to get it to the right height.
One way, gonna lay down, be still, won't waste another tear.
My second method is much simpler. I just trowel the mixture into the cracks of the stone, slightly overfilling it to be swept out later. I only use this second method if the stone's absolutely bone dry, because if there's any moisture in the stone, the general purpose cement can stick to it and stain it. That's why I sometimes use the first method with my jig, to keep the general purpose cement off the stone to stop it staining.
If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final I just take a bow. While it all falls apart, guess you can't win them all. Oh no.
After blowing off any loose cement dust with the vacuum cleaner, I wet the whole pathway down. I have the hose set on light misting because I don't want to wash out any of the material from the cracks. I just want to moisten and wet everything so the general purpose cement can set up over the next few days. It's very satisfying doing this last step in the process after all the work we've put into this sandstone pathway.
If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final I just take a bow. While it all falls apart, guess you can't win them all. Oh no.
The idea today is to build a seat here, cantilevered from the deck, so it doesn't have any posts supporting it. It's all going to be supported from the structure under this deck here. In the construction of this staircase pathway, we removed a bench seat that people have been using as an access point to this deck. So the owner would like another seat. It's going to run along here. We harvested this decking material, so we're going to reuse this to reclad it. The idea was to cantilever it from under the deck so we don't have any posts, to give it a more modern architectural look. I got the structure started the other day under the deck here, but we got rained off, so we'll take a look at that in a second. I'm just going to be adding beams that are locked into these pieces under here, cantilevered out here, We've got our staging area all set up. These are the framing timbers we're going to be used for the construction. Got my saw set up, so we're all ready to go.
The most challenging part of this project is going to be constructing the bracing we're going to need under the deck. This involves physically crawling under it and constructing the base of the frame that's going to support the cantilever bench.
Pretty cramped conditions under here, but there's just enough space to get the job done. We've got a tarp laid out up here. Anyway, this is the most difficult part of the job, getting these braces in. Going to run the timber all the way along. These are going to lock it into the deck. It's all going to be hidden when it's finished, and this will create the suspended cantilevered structure we're going to build the seat on out on the side of the deck.
With these two timber braces locked in place, I now work on assembling the main beam.
So I've set up some temporary props to hold this beam in place whilst we lock it off with some screws. These rain squalls keep coming in. It's not making it easy being under this deck whilst it's raining through these deck cracks into my face. Time to take shelter. It's part of the reality of Gippsland weather. These storms come rolling in from the Antarctic and they can hit us at any time.
The following day the weather improved. Before being rained off yesterday, we got the main beam installed, which is going to support the framing that cantilevers out from under this deck to support our bench seat. I'm going to be installing timbers that attach back to the main beam we installed yesterday. I'll need some accurate measurements for these timbers, so I'm going to have to crawl back under the deck. By getting a measurement from our main support beam up to the edge of the deck, I can calculate how long these timbers will have to be to support our bench seat.
Like lilies you open, the fragrance goes to my head, my darling. I get everything that has been, don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more.
After securing the joist that marks the end of our bench seat, I add heavy timber screws to the other end that's up against the stone staircase. With our two side joists in place, I'm ready to start working on the main beam structure. Sometimes it's easier to scribe a piece of timber in place than to measure it. You can get a much more accurate cut that way.
Now everything that has been don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more. We've earned it. Everything that has been don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more. We've earned it. Come closer, dance for me. Easy, tiger, easy, let your hair down.
I'm laying out some of the pieces of our recycled decking to work out where our cross joists are going to lie. Sometimes when you're using recycled materials, you've got to adapt the framing to fit the recycled pieces. Once I've made the calculations for the joist layout that's going to enable our recycled pieces to fit neatly, I start installing them with heavy timber screws.
Give me tears, I can cry. Give me life so I don't die. Give me tears so I can cry. Give me life so I don't die.
After completing all the framing, I double check our recycled pieces of decking to make sure they're going to lay out correctly on our joist.
There's no use in trying, and even if you could, it wouldn't come out like it should. This stubborn kudzu just covers these words. Could you listen to somebody else? Will you
using 5mm packers in between the decking boards to keep a consistent gap in the layout. I'm working my way along the bench seat in sections, taking my time and trying to be as gentle as possible, as these old recycled planks are quite brittle and I don't want to split them. I'm finishing off the pilot holes with a specialised countersink bit. This creates enough room in the timber for the screw head to sit neatly underneath the top of the boards for a really nice finish.
Back up the drive a bit, could you see what this is? This is a part of it all. Over and over, injustice to injury. This is a part of it all. Could you hike back to it, fight with it, sit with it? This is a part of it all. Ask around, be aware, make peace with what is there. Who told you that it was too late?
It also doubles up as a stairway access to the garden area from the deck. It's just large steps.
The completed bench seat concludes all our work for the sandstone path and staircase project. Let's have a quick look back on all the work we did to get here.
Buried in my chair, the only thing that's left. If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final, I just take a bow. While it all falls apart, guess you can't win them all. Oh no, city, rain.
Gus is my helper on this job site. It was a lot of fun. What you guys do?